After their success with the first 3 Wallace and Gromit shorts, Park and Lord were invited to join DreamWorks and make movies for them. Park pitched the idea of The Great Escape with chickens, and Spielberg loved the idea, and the two got to work immediately to bring this idea to life. And so in 2000 we were given the full-length stop-motion animated classic, Chicken Run. Many people often praise Chicken Run for being the first fully stop-motion animated feature film, though that's not technically true. Creator of the California Raisins commercials, Will Vinton's The Adventures of Mark Twain, was actually the first, but Chicken Run was the first one to get major mainstream attention, and to this day is still the highest grossing stop-motion animated film of all time. But does it really deserve to be that praised? Well, let's find out. On an intensive chicken farm in the 1950s run by the terrifying Mrs. Tweedy and her long-suffering husband Mr. Tweedy, the pair keep several chickens to run a floundering egg business. But it's definitely not all sunshine and roses for these hens, with their squalid living environments and the constant threat of an axe hitting their neck if they can't lay eggs anymore. Their lives are miserable. So the spunky, kind and determined chicken Ginger, voiced by Julia Swahala, tries time and time again to break them all out and try and reach their proverbial paradise. But unfortunately she is met with failure every single time, and yet her head is never cut off, but there you go. After another failed attempt and another one of their friends being given the chop, all hope seems lost. That is until Ginger spots a Rhode Island red rooster flying, and subsequently crashing, into the farm, and gets the idea to get the chickens to fly out of the farm too. With the help of the cocky cock Rocky, played by Mel Gibson, the race is on to get the fat birds into the air, as the Tweedies have come up with a more pastry and gravy based fate for the chickens that spells disaster for them all. One of the biggest problems that Aardman had when starting to go into full-length movies is that a lot of their plots they used for the films were rather derivative and predictable, considering that the plots of their shorts, despite being smaller, seemed more interesting and unique, and sadly this film is where that trend started. But that's not because of the similarities to The Great Escape, since very little about this movie is comparable to that movie. It's how it used plot devices and beats that we've seen in tons of other movies before, which I won't give away here. And while they're done a little bit better here than in others, it does mean that if you're familiar with these beats, you know exactly what's going to happen from the first 20 minutes. Despite that though, a lot of this movie still feels very unique and has some great scenes in it. From the scenes where the chickens are trying to learn how to fly, to Rocky saving Ginger from the pie machine, which again looks like something out of a video game, and as always, one hell of a climax. And of course, one of the things that makes these scenes so good are the characters. Ginger is really likeable due to her kind heart and determination. Bunty, played by the great Imelda Staunton, is great as the group cynic.
What haven't we tried yet?
We haven't tried not trying to escape.
Babs, played by Jane Horrocks, is lovely in her innocence and endless quotability.
I don't want to be a pie. I don't like gravy.
Fowler is enjoyably curmudgeon-y. Timothy Spall's Nick is a great little Tom, Dick and Harry style side character.
The tension's killing me!
He's gonna kill her!
Plus any role that he does is automatically gold. And Mr. Tweedy, while not having much screen time, is enjoyably stupid.
What the dickens? Oh, gnomes now!
But, of course, the character that everyone remembers is the pants-crappingly terrifying Mrs. Tweedy.
It's chickens, you dolt! Apart from you, they're the most stupid creatures on this planet. They don't plot, they don't scheme, and they are not organised!
Played by an unrecognisable Miranda Richardson, Mrs. Tweedy is a character who, despite having the traditional bizarre Aardman facial structure, commands attention and fear in any scene she's in. And that really comes across down to Richardson's amazingly cold delivery and her character's intense facial expressions. Her plan is so basic and is arguably understandable from a certain point of view, but the way she goes about it and presents it, it makes it seem totally diabolical. This woman could make the idea of feeding puppies in an orphanage seem sinister.
This will take Tweedy's farm out of the dark ages and into full-scale automated production.
By far one of the greatest villains in an animated film ever.
Get the chickens.
Which ones?
All of them.
I'd say the only character to really suffer is Rocky. You get the idea that he's supposed to be a wisecracking fast talker, but his delivery just doesn't seem right.
You see, over in America, we have this rule. If you want to motivate someone, don't mention death.
Like he knows what he's saying is a lie and he doesn't believe it. And I guess that could be part of his development, that he eventually learns to drop his act and just be his real self. But you don't really see any change in his personality even by the end of the film. And sad to say, I think it really comes down to Gibson's performance. And while I can understand why they got him, I think someone who's a bit more well known for playing these types of characters might have worked better, like a Jim Carrey or a Jack Nicholson, or perhaps even an Eddie Murphy. And hell, this was produced by DreamWorks, they could have gotten him. Also, with Rocky being a Rhode Island Red, his accent should be a bit more East New Yorkish, rather than Gibson's Westchester accent. But the character still has some good lines and is enjoyable to watch. I just don't think he's used to his full potential here. Despite those flaws, this movie is still really enjoyable, and despite the plot beats being very predictable, when they do happen, they really hammer in the emotion of it without resorting too much on cliches like moody pop songs and dead space in the narrative. The way the characters act is very natural, plus it helps that the whole movie has this feel of dread and death around it. It makes it all feel a lot more suspenseful, so when things look bad, it feels bad. Speaking of which, the funny thing is that despite being a cinematic film, it still feels as enclosed as the Wallace and Gromit shorts. We don't really see outside of this farm until the very end, but that actually works to its advantage. It makes the captive quality for both the characters and the audience seem more poignant. This isn't just a farm, it's a POW camp, and that makes it more clear throughout the movie that this is a place that is miserable, which does make the movie seem more dire, but it does make it seem a tad depressing at times. But whenever something tough does happen, it's picked right back up again in the next scene. It reminds me a lot of the Don Bluth films in that regard, particularly All Dogs Go to Heaven, as its main character was a lot like Rocky. And hey, there's another person who would have been better for the role, Burt Reynolds. Also, despite this still being a rather small production, the upgrade that Aardman gave their animation is stellar. The scene where the chickens are training and moving in perfect unison, and just seeing how many moving characters there are on screen, it's incredible, especially considering that this all had to be done by hand. No copying or tricks. What you see here is what was really going on in the studio. It's amazing to see, and proof that Park and Lord are such pros at this. And while the more barren environment means that we get less great background jokes that we got in Wallace and Gromit, you don't really notice that with the amazing quality and fluency of the animation, which is only getting better and better at this point in Aardman's history. Overall, even though this movie is a tad overrated in my opinion, it's still a triumph in terms of animation and home movie ambition. It shows that even the smallest filmmakers can rise to the top through hard work and creativity, and through a mixture of enjoyable characters, great set pieces, and really unique tone for a kids film, and thus the world of Hollywood was opened up to this little animation shed from England. But what would they do next? Well, stay tuned for that.